Well, this year's Guineas produced two very different results, but equally thrilling for Aidan O'Brien. Racing Journalist of the Year Lee Mottershead joins me in the studio to look back on these and look ahead to the next classics at Epsom. And Lee, considering Camelot was such a short price favourite, there did seem to be an awful lot of opposition to him in the run-up to the race.
Yeah, I think the vibes going into the race from Ballydoyle were mixed. Not so much that they were saying anything negative, but there just wasn't a huge amount of positivity, primarily because of A, the ground, and B, the trip. There was clearly a feeling that soft ground wouldn't suit him, and that a mile would be very much at the far end of what he would cope with distance-wise. In the end, he did it well, I thought. I thought watching the race, first off through binoculars, focused on him, he was always going well. And when Joseph O'Brien started to get serious on him, I sensed he was always going to win the race and that he was always going to do just enough. French 15 did come at him with a very serious challenge inside the final furlong, but I never thought he wasn't going to win the race. And in that sense, for a horse by Mongeur over a mile in the Classic, it was a hugely encouraging performance, if not breathtaking visually.
Well, talking about Epsom, this time usually when a horse wins in the Guineas, it's then the big debate, will they stay the trip at Epsom? Surely by Mongeur, he's had 3 Derby winners, it's not really a question for this one.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so, no. I mean, there's never any guarantee to actually get them on the racecourse. But certainly, in terms of breeding, he's by a sire who's produced 3 Derby winners already. He imparts so much stamina into racehorses. You would be hugely surprised if he didn't stay a mile and a half. And certainly his run style on Saturday, the way he finished the race, would again suggest a mile and a half would be perfect for him. He's a very well-balanced individual. You look at him when he makes his challenges, he doesn't tend to drift around or run around. He looks very professional for a horse who's only had 3 runs to date. So there's nothing negative about Camelot when it comes to assessing his Derby claims. The only negative thing around him is the price. He's a very short price, and you have to also just bear in mind that although everything about him looks Derby winner, you could have said the same not too long ago about a horse like Entrepreneur, who won the Guineas looking for all the world like a Derby horse, was sent off odds on at Epsom and didn't actually produce. So you have to bear that in mind, but at this stage everything's positive apart from the price, and that's the big issue, I think.
What about the horses that finished in behind him? Anything from the Guineas that you could see sort of turning up at Epsom, giving him more of a serious race?
No, nothing at all. No, I mean, I think if as a son of Mongeur he was good enough to beat those horses over a mile, there's no obvious logical way you could say that anything he beat would then be able to beat him over a mile and a half. No.
Well, it wasn't just Camelot that impressed on Saturday. Also in action was Frankel's brother, Noble Mission. Lee, what did you make of that performance?
I thought he was impressive enough. It was only his 3rd start. It was a decent listed race. Arguably, you could say the most eye-catching performance in that race was by Michelangelo, John Gosden's horse, because he was racing for the very first time. The fact that he was introduced in a listed race says a lot, and the fact that he was almost good enough to win it says even more. So I think if I was taking a Derby horse from that race, it might be Michelangelo. In truth, I don't think any of them will be good enough to win the Derby, and I think Noble Mission is a long way below the ability of his brother. But he's clearly a likeable horse. But he said to me now, where will Noble Mission end up this season? I'd say if he wins a Group 3, they'll be pretty pleased.
So more of a bullet train than a Frankel.
I'd say he's better than Bullet Train, and looks more straightforward than Bullet Train, even allowing for the hood. But I don't think we're looking at this stage anything more than a Group 3 class horse.
Okay, well, moving on to the 1,000 Guineas, and Homecoming Queen, Graham Dench in Monday's racing paper said performance too good to be true. What did you make of it?
Incredible, really. That she was good enough to win the Guineas full stop, when you think that her first 7 starts produced form figures of 6-3, 9, 6, 5, 4, 3. She didn't win a race in her first 7 races. She got off the mark in a mark in the early 70s in a nursery. That was not the profile of a 1,000 Guineas winner, full stop. It certainly wasn't the profile of a horse who wins a race by as far as she did, in the manner that she did. 9 lengths pulverising the opposition. The obvious thing to say, as Graham has said, is that it's too good to be true. And I think you've got to go and see her do it again before you can be convinced.
Well, last season we saw Blue Bunting win the Guineas and then go on to prove herself at a top-class mile-and-a-half filly. Do you think this once half-sister to Dylan Thomas, sire Holy Roman Emperor, has produced mile-and-a-half winning mares? Do you think she could be a Serious Oaks candidate?
Well, you make the point there by talking about the breeding, that it's a mixed bag in the sense that her half-brother very much stayed a mile-and-a-half. In fact, he excelled over a mile-and-a-half. But Holy Roman Emperor, although he's produced mile-and-a-half horses, you wouldn't be guaranteed to produce a mile-and-a-half horse by any means. And the speed that she showed on Sunday might make you question whether she'll stay a mile-and-a-half. I don't think at this stage she'd be even certain to go to Epsom, just because Ballydoyle have got Kist, who looks very smart, and he's very much the Oaks favourite based on her win last week. Wading, who we've still not seen yet this season, but looks a mile-and-a-half filly. They might well think with Homecoming Queen we'll go Coronation Stakes route, we'll go Irish Guineas route, we'll go Prix de Diane route. At this stage, you can't back Homecoming Queen for the Oaks because there is no degree of certainty that they're even thinking about Epsom 4 yet. Anything
else in the Guineas that you could see coming out in the Oaks and running a big race?
Well, not at this stage, just because so many of them ran below par. You're very hard to pick a filly and say, well, that one, A, has run to her best. The two Gosden fillies ran very well. But aside from that, it's hard to be dogmatic that even maybe ran to her best. So at this stage, if there was an encouraging Oaks display on Sunday, I think it came in the Pretty Polly, not in the 1,000 Guineas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, moving on to the Pretty Polly and Kaylani, impressive, but do you think she needs it soft to show her best?
Well, I spoke to Simon Crisford, the Godolphin racing manager, this morning, and he was very much hinting that until we see her produce that sort of form on a quicker surface, we have to take it that the ground that she encountered at Newmarket on Sunday is what she wants and possibly what she needs. Her mother was an Oaks winner, Kazia, and her mother stayed a mile-and-a-half very well, as I'm sure this filly will too. But the ground is the question at the moment. It was very un-Guineas-like ground that weekend at Newmarket. And again, at this stage, I wouldn't be convinced that on quick ground she is an Oaks winner.
Mm-hmm. And before we get the view from the markets with George Primarolo, let's just look ahead to this week in Chester. Which horses are you particularly looking forward to seeing?
Well, just the one really in terms of the classics. I think Bonfire in the D Stakes on Friday is going to be a fascinating horse to look at. He should have won that Group 1 in France last back end. He had no sort of run to the Saint-Cloud race. That's very good form that's been franked, and he could be anything. Andrew Balding is very bullish about him. And I think he is an example of why at this stage Camelot is not a bet at evens, 5-4 shade of odds on, whichever way you look at it. Because although Camelot will improve from a mile-and-a-half and certainly will stay a mile-and-a-half, there's no guarantee that over a mile-and-a-half he will have superiority that reflects him being evens. And horses like Bonfire, like Mandaean, like Kezampur, like Akid Mafid, being 10, 12, 14, 20 to 1. They shouldn't be those sort of prices relative to Camelot. I don't think at this stage. I think Camelot is much the likeliest winner of the Derby at the moment, but he's not, I don't think, an odds-on shot.
Well, time now to get the verdict from Betfred's George Primarolo, who joins me on the line now. And George, Camelot's always been talked of as a Derby horse, and his performance on Saturday can't have done anything to dispel that.
No, definitely not. I mean, he's a short price now for the Derby, as expected after that run. And to be honest, even if he'd have narrowly been defeated, I think everyone would have been looking at it as one of the best Derby trials probably that we'll end up seeing. And I don't think anything has changed that view. He almost it was a last gasp victory. I mean, almost in a way, if he goes on and lands a Derby and maybe a Ledger, then it was very reminiscent in the style that Oh So Sharp did it all those years ago in the Guineas, sort of a last gasp victory.
And I'm sure Aidan O'Brien will be saying they're taking it one race at a time. But what price do you have Camelot for the Triple Crown?
Triple Crown at the moment would be around 3-1 to land that. I think it's very, very wise to take it one at a time. But of course, if he does win the Derby, then I think you'd imagine the Triple Crown will be at his mercy, because he'll probably be, a slightly better class of horse than has ended up going for the Ledger in recent years. And you'd have thought if he does win the Derby, then if they, the only thing stopping him from winning the Triple Crown, I guess, will be if connections decide to go elsewhere.
Now, another Derby contender we saw on Saturday was Noble Mission. Generated quite a mixed reaction. We've heard from Lee Mottershead. He didn't sound too impressed with Frankel's brother at Newmarket. You, though, have got him as 14-1 second favourite for the Derby.
I think he still looked green. It was only his fourth run of his career, and I think he's going to be a nice horse. And I think, unfortunately for him, the comparisons that he's going to have with his brother Frankel, he's never going to live up to those expectations. But take everything as equally. I just think that it was a nice Derby trial, and he certainly deserves to go to Epsom with a live chance.
And moving on to the Oaks, Homecoming Queen, of course, put herself in the picture with a devastating win in the 1,000 guineas. And is it really a case now of which Aidan O'Brien trained filly is going to win that race?
Well, it does look like it. I mean, he's got the first four in the betting, and Homecoming Queen, amazing to see her, win a guineas after a very busy 2-year-old campaign. And she's had plenty of miles on the clock, and it's a very difficult race, I suppose, to weigh up. Was it a very impressive performance on soft ground? Did she manage to nick it from the front? I'm still not quite sure of the relative merits. I mean, it could turn out to be a very good guineas. It could turn out that it just happened to be one of those races on the day where everything's all right for us. So mixed messages on pedigree as well for Homecoming Queen. So, but there's no denying that she's very gutsy and she's got heart as big as a lion. So that'll stand her in good stead at Epsom. Suppose slightly better bred horses for the job in terms of stamina would be the likes of Kist and Wading, and there were mixed message. I suppose maybe ran an okay race in the Guineas, but it didn't exactly scream top miler or top middle distance horse really. So I think the jury's still out on maybe. The one I thought to take out the race was John Gosden's The Fugue, having only a second run. And she finished about fourth or fifth, I think, in the end, staying on really stoutly. Now, her pedigree, especially on the dam side, is all about stamina, and I thought it was a really encouraging run. Only a second run of her entire life in the Guineas. I thought it was an excellent run. Interesting to see where she goes next, whether she'll go straight for the Oaks or indeed taking an Oaks trial somewhere. It wouldn't surprise me to see her at somewhere like, maybe come out pretty quickly at somewhere like Lingfield or maybe the Musadora and just get a bit more experience under her belt before she heads to Epsom.